fueling of aggregate demand. So yes, there is a certain amount of risk for that, but it's a balancing act that you have to perform. Going by the results of what India has achieved, it's done the balancing act extremely well. It's part of this is luck because there is no hard science of saying that this much deficit for this much time is right. You have to use your judgment, intuition, and I think thus far the Ministry of Finance has pulled off a fairly good balance of how much deficit for how long and the pullback, but the risks are there.
Professor Basu, I'm Dr. Abdul. I teach economics at university here and also work for World Bank. I've always admired you as an economist, but now that you are in the government, you may have to answer for others since also. Now, you mentioned about this global meltdown. And starting 2008, the way the global economy, particularly at that time, the American economy was melting, and it had implications for India. I fail to understand the policies that government of India had adopted at that point of time and some even now. First issue is, at that point of time, there were two challenges. Global slowdown was putting pressure on India's growth process. At the same time, there was an inflationary challenge. But we knew that this inflation at that point of time was sectoral. God knows why. Government of India operated.
Which year are you talking about?
2008. 2008, 2009. Now, 2008, at that point of time, God knows why, despite nature of inflation being sectoral, we opted for a macroeconomic solution. We tried to intervene on the money side. Reserve Bank of India was trying to intervene. Now, three developments happened there. One, given that global meltdown, lots of FII outflow happened from India. Around 70,000 crore worth of FII resources were invested in India, were taken back from India by October 2008.
Even more, I think. But yes.
Secondly, Indian banks, they took permission from RBI, they took back around 1 lakh crore from India, which means it comes close to around 2 lakh crores. Simultaneously, RBI skewed liquidity. Around 2 lakh crores were withdrawn from the market. Indian economy was hard pressed, the liquidity crunch happened, largely because of the policies adopted by Government of India. Whatever slowdown happened in India at that point of time, it was not so much global impact. As a matter of fact, I fail to understand that why at that point of time, when global economy was melting, India, even during this crisis period, we have been growing at around 6.7% or 7% odd. There was no slowdown in India. There was no reason for a bailout package. What was required was to support that growth process. We failed to do that. Rather, we created domestic hurdles at that point of time. That's concern number one. Concern number two is, always we were told that there are Indian fundamentals are strong. Everybody, Finance Minister, Prime Minister, people like you, everybody was telling us this. Now when you look at fundamentals, you mentioned about the GDP, and within that GDP, investment and savings in India, 2007 is the peak. Indian investment reaches around 37. Out of that, around 36 is our own domestic savings. Now, from that point onwards, now we are at 32. It's coming down. From 2002, it jumps to 37. Now it comes down at 2009-10. The picture is substantially bad. So that fundamental is now weakening. That's challenge number two. Challenge number three is why we have not used public distribution system the way we should have used for managing inflation. That's another concern. And then, I think when global economy is melting down, the finest option for India is second generation reform. It is pending since 1991. Dr. Manmohan Singh has been telling 91 and thereafter that sooner rather than later there will be second generation reform. We have failed to introduce second generation reform in full measure. No doubt the states also have a role there, but Government of India has failed to take the kind of lead which was required. Because under such situation, as you are rightly saying, there is a demand constraint. Demand is stagnant. Under such situation, you have to bring domestic demand as an opportunity. And India is a domestic demand story. All the multinationals are lining up largely because of that. We have failed to bring in state generation reform, which in my understanding should have primarily meant rural development and human development, which means health and education. I think there's lots of business which we have to cover there. And thirdly, and the next is that you are talking about is food security. I think conditional cash transfer, the Brazilian great story, which has now expanded to the rest of the world, right here in Bangladesh, there are huge success stories. Why shouldn't we experiment with conditional cash transfer or subsidies and the kind of challenge that you are mentioning? These are real challenges. But I think we have to change the here now, we have to change the strategy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just internet. Everybody should question one question only. Because we are running out of time. Just one question. There is some kind of question.
It's not new.
So let me, actually let me quickly, I want to address, and some of those I really don't even have a proper answer. I'm not going to conditional cash transfers. Given that India has adopted targeted transfers, which is the policy that we are doing, I feel we just have to do it better, and it's possible to do much better. And you can also have it supporting conditional cash transfers taking place like through Progresa or Oportunidades in Mexico, Bolsa Escola in Brazil. You can do those things. It's possible. The Latin American countries have done well. So I would not say that you don't do this. Your inflation question. Inflation management is such a, I mean, you're an economist, you know, it's a very difficult thing. It's true that you're quite right, the numbers you're giving is quite right, that RBI was raising the repo and reverse repo when the inflation was taking place in 2008, quite a bit to hold it back. However, there's one thing you have to watch. The inflation now, the one which is occurring over 2009-10, so it's beginning to peter off, but we are in it. This one has been even more sector specific. Though the earlier inflation was coming internationally because international commodity prices have risen, this one is even more sector specific. If you look at the November data, it was virtually entirely food inflation and zero non-food inflation. Now it has evened out a little bit more. Food has gone down, non-food has picked up. So it's not as if the 2008 was really as sector specific as this one has been. Just that this one has been more domestically. There we could point to international fingers, here we can't do. I do feel that drought played a role, but a variety of other factors that contributed to this. The savings question. Savings, I feel you're reading a bit too much into the drop in the savings rate. The savings rate 2007-8 is, you're quite right, 2008-9 is 32.5. The year before that it had peaked, it was 36.4. So the savings rate went up to 36.4, it's come down. This is the first time it's come down. Is this a sign that now we are undoing it? I don't think so. You see, my view on the savings rate is simple. If you look at the component of the savings, corporate savings, household savings, government savings, the government, Indian government, which is usually a dissaver, spends more than it earns, had become a plus saver till about 2 years ago. And that was contributing to the savings rate. There was also an increase in corporate savings in a big way, it went up. The reason why the savings rate has dropped to 32.5 from 36.4 is because the government component, which was a net saver, has become a net dissaver. To me, this is just another side of the stimulus package. The government is deliberately overspending, so it's come down. On the savings, my expectation is the savings is going to pick up for two reasons. As the stimulus is rolled back, government's fiscal deficit is going to go down, so government's dis-saving may again turn into plus savings. Suddenly the dis-savings will go down, so that's going to contribute to the savings rate rising. Another thing is the demographic dividend. India's working age population is rising. As you know, it's going to rise over the next 25-30 years. And since the working age people are the people who do the savings, when the fraction of society that is working age increases, the savings rate goes up. So I feel on the savings rate, I disagree with you. I think we are on fairly good turf. It's a downturn, you're seeing a temporal one. It's going to go up again over the next 2-3 years. We'll meet and compare notes on that. Let me stop on that.
Sir, Manish Awasthi, Secretary Tourism. So which are the sectors in the infrastructure sector which have not done well? What you as Chief Economic Advisor, or what the Government of India intends to do for these sectors? And as a corollary to that, how does public-private partnership come into this? What is the Government of India's view on this?
Yeah, infrastructure, I don't talk about I think it's critically important, but I don't talk about too much because I think that's going to happen. India has woken up to that and you're going to see changes. But rural infrastructure, we need to have much more happening there. So if you want me to point to one kind of infrastructure where I'm concerned, it's the rural infrastructure. You just enable people to be more productive. You don't have to give them handouts if you can enable them to be more productive. So that's really the caveat where you need to build. What was your other question?
Public-private partnership.
Public-private partnership, it's a fashionable thing. It's being talked about a lot. The Daily Telegraph had a beautiful cartoon on public-private partnership. Tony Blair used to talk about it in every meeting. So the British were getting bored about public-private partnership. So there is a person having surgery